for what he did for his father. It was a Sunday afternoon, and they had been training. And Colin was such a good pilot that he was the only guy there at Hickam that could train the older pilots on flying the new B-17 made by Boeing at Seattle, the Flying Fortress. So what did he and his wife do? They had a dinner on the grounds at their home, and they invited all 8 crew members and their wives and children. Well, you said, well, that's great. He was a football player at Madison. He went to West Point. He learned teamwork. He was a pilot on the crew. He'd gone through flying and was a captain. He knew what teamwork was. It was forbidden for an officer of the United States Army to invite enlisted men to their home for a social engagement. He says, listen, if we're going to go to war, and the wings of war were in the air, I want my crew member to be a part of my family, just like my father back in Madison. I want them to feel that we can, as a team, win this ball game, and I want every one of them to cross-train he did. The colonel brought him in and said, Captain Kelly, you violated orders here at Hickam Field by Pearl Harbor, and I should punish you. He says, you can't do that, Colonel, because my men are the best crew there is. Sergeant Altman, he runs my radio. Jim Halkyard is my crew chief, and I got Levin as my bombardier. You know why we're a team? Because we can not only train together, they met my wife, they met my family, I met their wives, and we're a team. And we're going to go as a team, and if you want to take my stripe away, do it. But that's the way it is. Nothing ever happened. Colin Kelly, a brave man. MacArthur realized something was fixing to happen. So he sends a telegram to Washington. He said, I got to have some B-17s because movement of the Japanese fleet, they're already in Korea, they're already in China. I got to have some heavies. So Colin Kelly did something no one else had ever done. Amelia Earhart tried to do it. He flew the Pacific Ocean with his B-17 and 6 others. He led the formation, and they flew from Hickam Field, Hawaii, to Midway, to Wake Island, to New Caledonia, to Brisbane, Australia, and then the last leg to Clark Field by Miller. No American bomber had ever flown the Pacific Island. Colin Kelly led the crew. Now, Bob Altman told me, as he did often at his apartment, he said, Thomas, it wasn't an ordinary flight. The last leg was from Australia all the way to the Philippines, 1,000-something miles. And guess what? We ran into a hurricane. They call it typhoons. A typhoon, Brother David, you're right. And he said, let me tell you what, when we landed out of gas, we thank God because guess what? All 7 planes made it. Colin Kelly, a great pilot. Now, the third thing he did, as Bill said, a few days before December 7th, Major O'Donnell said, Colin, something's happening north here. We're getting all these radio signals from Japanese ships, planes. I want you to go to Formosa. There's a 10-mile limit of international water. Fly off the coast. I'm going to give you a professional Army intelligence photographer. Photograph what you can and come back. So Kelly takes off with Sergeant Altman and Halkyard and the guys I've met. And as he gets near Formosa, he sees a Japanese bomber going in to land at a base on the coast. So he disregards O'Donnell's orders and he gets behind him and actually flies right in on the Navy base, taking pictures of all these hundreds of planes, crowded airfield, and what they took a picture was the Japanese Navy bombers putting big bombs in the plane. They weren't practice bombs. He got a picture of the Japanese Zeros loading up with incendiary, with tracers, with all this ammunition. There was no question on every man of that 8-man crew, Pearl Harbor was fixing to happen. Before the Zeros could launch, because Kelly had no bonds, he puts it wide open and gets back to Clark Field. He said, Colonel, you're not going to believe this. They are ready to strike tomorrow. So the Colonel says, Kelly, you get the men ready. We got 35 bombers, and we're going to knock the heck out of them tomorrow morning. He sends the signal to Manila, 50 miles away. General Sutherland takes it to MacArthur. MacArthur said, court-martial that damn Kelly. He should have never gone up there over that base because he could have started World War II. Wait a minute, General MacArthur. They're fixing. They put the arrow in the bow. Don't you understand? Can't do it. We can't go hit them first. The colonel was so mad, Colonel Eubanks. He said, Kelly, take half the planes. Take 16 of them planes and head south to the old pineapple plantation. They got a dirt runway on Mindanao, and I want you to land there and hide out. So when the Japanese come, they're not going to get you. Sure enough, Kelly takes off. Sergeant Altman and them sleep under the wings at the Dole Pineapple Plantation, 400 miles south. Pearl Harbor happens. The weather was bad over Formosa, so they get a signal at 3 o'clock in the morning at Colin's Field that the battleships, 8 of them, had been sunk, and over 2,000 men killed. Thank God Colin Kelly was safe south. Let me take you to the next step. Now here is the island of Oahu. That morning, up on this mountain, we had an Army, the new radar, 3 men operating a radar trailer, looking to the north and to the east. And at 6 o'clock, 210 blips appear on their radar screen. So the little young officer calls down to Hickam Field here and says, "Officer, today we got 210 planes coming in from the north." So the officer today looks on the schedule. "Oh yeah, we got 5 B-17s coming in from Oakland, California. That must be what you saw." We got planes from the north, not from the east. All you boys go to breakfast, don't worry about it. That morning, a young captain was in charge of a new destroyer, and he was paroling the entrance to Pearl Harbor. And the young captain spots a Japanese periscope. The men all agree it's a periscope in their water right near the harbor. They fire a shell, it goes into the submarine, and the submarine disappears. And they pick up. The captain radios Pearl Harbor and said, "We just sighted a Japanese submarine trying to slip into the harbor, and we sunk it." And they're saying, "What the heck kind of coffee is he drinking?" "Don't worry about it. You don't understand, we sunk it." Guess what? We were warned an hour and a half before those 2 attacks, and we disregarded it. Now look what happened. This is the first wave, 7 o'clock that morning. They hit 7 different airfields and bases, not just Pearl Harbor. We were caught with our pants down. The dumb general decided one Marine could guard 6 planes. So he put all the planes at Hickam Field, up at Wheeler Field, and Kaneohe, all in clusters. So all it took was 1 bomb, and all the planes would go. I mean, General Shorter was court-martialed and should have been. Now, what did Admiral Kimmel do? Admiral Kimmel has 8 battleships. What did he do? He had them all in Pearl Harbor that morning with no torpedo nets. Why? Because they didn't think the Japanese were smart enough to make a torpedo that could run across Pearl Harbor. Kimmel was later court-martialed. All 8 battleships were sunk. 2,000 Americans were lost. And look what happened. Now you're going to see something you don't normally see. The Arizona blows up, but look to the left and you're going to see the Pennsylvania rolling over with 1,000 men on board. It's going to be right here. Coming up, there's the Arizona. There it is right there. Pennsylvania rolls over with thousands of men on board. Those Navy divers go out there, and for hours they cut and cut and cut, and finally they cut through the double bottom of the Pennsylvania, and a few hundred men escaped. 2,000 men there died. Thousands were wounded. We knocked down 49 Japanese planes, 1 submarine, and 2 midget submarines. The war was on. Colin Kelly was safe at the Del Monte plantation. Well, Roosevelt had planned that this could happen, but from the Germans. But he was also planned to pull our country together. Now, this is a unique picture that I put here. Most people don't know that President Franklin Roosevelt was a cripple. He was handicapped. And here's one of the few pictures you'll see with his braces as he stands. He never let his picture be made with crutches. But here, getting out of his car, you can see him holding on. But just because he was handicapped from the waist down, it was he and Churchill that carried forth the fight. Listen to what he says.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
America, as Bill said, needed a hero. We had been completely destroyed. All 8 battleships sunk or completely damaged. All these men, the planes were shot up. We had one other base, Clark Field, where Captain Colin Kelly was stationed. Now, fortunately, Colin Kelly had gone south with half the planes. For some reason, the Jap planes came in later, and every bomber we had on Clark Field was destroyed. MacArthur lost his right hand. They call it the Little Pearl Harbor. But Colin Kelly, the colonel, sending him south, brought his planes back. For some reason, Sergeant Altman said, of the 16 planes, only 3 of them got back to Clark Field. As Bill said, they were there putting in the bombs when the Japanese came back the second time. And here he is. What a handsome captain he was. Kelly realized when he flew over Formosa that there were a lot of Navy ships, big ships. So he ordered Sergeant Altman to go to the radio shack to get the code for that day. And then he in a Jeep rushed out to headquarters to get his orders. As they were loading the bombs, the Japanese came back. And Captain Kelly, according to Bob Altman and Sergeant Halkyard, did something they had never seen done. With the bomb rack still in the plane and only 3 bombs on board, Kelly says, we got to go. We're not going to be like the rest of those boys shot on the ground. He cranked all 4 engines on this B-17C model at one time. Altman said it had never been done and never seen it done. They took off with the bomb bay door open in the rack there. They got off the runway. The crate fell out, full of dust. Altman said they shut the bomb bay and they were off. Where the other 2 planes went, I'm not sure, but I've read from the account. One went to scout the west. Colin Kelly went north to look for what they thought was an aircraft carrier. But because they couldn't believe that many planes could hit Manila, the Navy base near Subic Bay, and Clark Field but for a carrier. They didn't realize that Colin Kelly had seen 4 or 5 days before, those planes were coming 200 miles from Formosa. There was no aircraft carrier. So Kelly gets up to the north end of Luzon and sees the invading force, the famed force that beats MacArthur at Corregidor Peninsula, where Sandy Nittinger got the Medal of Honor. The same course that surrounded MacArthur at Corregidor and he escaped in the PT boat. That same force is landing. So Kelly goes out, runs the grid, can't find the aircraft carrier, and calls back to Clark, says, I want permission. There's a big ship down there, a battleship, a heavy cruiser. I want permission to sink it. They said, Captain Kelly, we're being hit. We can't find an officer. You'll have to get back with us. Kelly said, thank you. He said, guys, we're going to go in on a bombing run. We're the only plane we got left out of 35. We got to make these 3 eggs count. Let's do it. So he flew over what they thought was the battleship Aurora. The navigator looked at it, the bombardier looked at it, they consulted with Kelly because of their friendship, and they said, Captain, we need to go at an angle so we got a better shot than our 3 bombs. And as Bill says, the first one fell short, the second one went right down the middle, and the third one fell off the nose. They circled, according to Sergeant Altman, 30 minutes looking at the oil filling out in the flames. They went back in a victory. We may have been beaten at Pearl Harbor. Guess what? That day, they sunk the flagship of that fleet. So they dropped down, and as they did, as shown in this picture that you saw earlier, 10 Japanese Zeros called in by the Admiral attacked their B-17. This was the early model. It did not have self-sealing tanks. And as you saw in the other picture, the left side caught on fire because there was no protection. The Japanese pilot blew out the control panel, and Kelly realized without the control panel and the plane on fire, he had to save his men. So as Altman said, we got the order from Captain Kelly, guys, bail out. They had just gotten over the edge of the island of Luzon. They were not out over the ocean where the battleship was. So he said, catch a ride back to Clark Field. As he held the plane steady, everybody bailed out except one rear gunner back here who was cut in half by the Japanese fighters. Kelly could have taken the easy way out. He could have bailed out, but not Colin Kelly from Madison, Florida. He held that plane. And as I have a quote from the Japanese pilot that flew up beside him out of machine gun bullets, he admired this American pilot because everybody went out except the captain, and he stayed at the controls. Well, as Sergeant Altman told me, as they came down, looking for Kelly's chute to open, looking for Kelly to come out, the last man on the ship, the plane exploded, and Captain Colin Kelly was killed. But that wasn't the end of the story. The Japanese were such SOBs, they came back around, and as you're going to hear with Frank Sinatra's interview, 8 times they circled those parachute guys and shot them in the air. Thank God they didn't kill any of them, and they landed to tell another story. Florida and America's first hero was born. Now let me take you to the interview, and then we'll conclude. It's a few minutes before 1. We'll conclude. Is this the one I want, Logan, right here?
That's the one.
Logan's got to be a Phi Beta Kappa from Florida. No Seminole from Florida. No Seminole would know how to work this thing. Yes, sir. I guarantee you, Logan, Phi Beta Kappa. Did I hit the right one?
Yeah, it's good.
Now listen to what he says in light of what Bill told you. This is 70-year-old film.
That young fella didn't have a drama. Just an ordinary young American with a kind of ordinary American name. 11. My 11. Born in Brooklyn 26 years ago. They say he wasn't much at school, but he won the Navy Cross just the same. We're bringing down a lot of Japanese planes and sinking a couple of ships, too, with a guy named Kelly. Colin Kelly. This is the last time you're ever going to see Meyer, because he's dead now. Knocked out by the Japs. It's a good thing somebody had a voice recording set up out in the Pacific and asked him, what was your most exciting adventure, Meyer?
Well, I've been on about 50 bombing missions. I think my narrowest escape was when I was flying with Captain Colin P. Kelly in the Philippines. We just sent the Haruna and we're on our way back to our home base. We were attacked by 2 Japanese pursuit. They came up from below and behind us, got on a blind spot behind the tail and stayed there. They were throwing everything they had at us. Cannon, armor-piercing, tracer, and incendiary bullets were pouring through the cabin. They set the ship on fire. When the control cables burned through, the pilot called over interphone and told us to bail out. I got down to the escape hatch and found my navigator, Lieutenant Joe B, struggling with the door, trying to get out. Seems that the emergency release had frozen. Well, I realized we didn't have much time to waste, so I kicked the door open with one foot and kicked him out with the other. Then, well, I guess a man gets superhuman strength at times. I tore the door off the hinges and went out with it. Counted 8, pulled my ripcord. Good old chute blossom. Well, that made me pretty happy for a minute. Picture changed, though, rather quick. 2 pursuit, shot our plane down, set it on fire, came around and started to strafe us. They made 8 separate passes. Tracer bullets coming all around us. Look up at my chute and see them going through. See them going around my legs. One stream of tracers caught my right pant leg and ripped it up to the knee. Managed to get down okay. Guess I'm pretty lucky. I haven't been hit yet.
Well, we can turn on the lights, and I have one other thing to say here today, and that is Bob Altman had me believe in Colin Kelly. As a young boy, my brothers and I loved to bird hunt. So one day, my father and grandfather invited me to Pinetta, just above here, for a dove shoot. There was a nice man there, and I introduced myself, and he says, I'm Colin Kelly. He says, I know your granddad. I bought barrels from him in Jacksonville, Pensacola, and I know your dad, and I'm glad to have you here. And my father said, son, this man's son got the Medal of Honor at Pearl Harbor. So I believed until a few years ago that Colin Kelly was the Medal of Honor winner. And today, he's it. Let me end with this quote. This is the Japanese pilot who, during the course of the war, 200 engagements, shot down 64 of our planes. Quote, out of ammunition, I flew alongside the B-17 and saw the pilot trying to save the burning aircraft after allowing the crew to escape. I have tremendous respect for him. What greater tribute can a warrior say about our hero, Colin Kelly? Thank you.
So now you see why it was such a privilege for Tom N to do the research. And what a privilege to offer the resolution commending this great part of our American history. The final comment is that the irony of the awarding of the first Medal of Honor also went to a Floridian, a member of the Fort Lauderdale High School Key Club who had gone to West Point, Lieutenant Sandy Nininger, of which they found his body on the Bataan Peninsula with 9 of the enemy all strewn around him. And Lieutenant Nininger was the first Medal of Honor awarded. That is a particularly meaningful to me because Lieutenant Nininger is the hero for Key Club. And it is his West Point sword that is given to the custody and care of the International Key Club president for the year that that young fella is president. I had the privilege of having that West Point sword during my senior year in high school. Wow. Thank you for letting Tom and me bring this to you.